let's begin with our guest who joined us here in Lagos, Mr. Taiwo Yedele, Fiscal Policy Partner, Africa, Tax Leader at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Also here is Segun Ajayi Kadir, Director General, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
In Abuja studio, we have Yinka Okpeke, CEO of Smart Gas, and also Professor Joseph Nana, Chief Economist, African Development Bank. Thank you for joining us. Via Zoom, we understand, President of the Women of Mining Nigeria, Engineer Janet Adeyemi, has joined us, and also Biz Macroeconomic, CEO of Financial Derivatives Company Limited. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you. I'd like to begin with our guest here in Lagos, and maybe I can start with you, Mr. Yedele, and this is what we heard the President say today. He says he feels our pains when it comes to the fuel subsidy. Does he really feel the pain of Nigerians now that fuel subsidy is gone?
Thank you, and happy Democracy Day, Nigerians. I think it's important. I'd like to start by saying that democracy is important, but I think that the economy is even more important. And if you don't have a thriving economy where people see opportunities, then democracy will lose its essence. That's why Nigerians today, young and old, will be glad to leave the country and sometimes go to countries where they have no democracy. And even in countries where they have democracy, they're not likely going to be voting anytime soon, and they're happy with that. So we need to take that into account while we are celebrating democracy. So having said that, I think it's a good thing for the president to say, I feel your pain. But we have to go beyond that. We just spoke about trust. Do I trust that? Does the average Nigerian on the street trust that? Does the small business owner believe that in the first place? How about the person in the village? So, and the way to do that is not just by saying it. It's by taking steps to show that you feel the pain. What people are talking about, for example, is you're asking us to make sacrifices. We have been making sacrifices. You want us to make more sacrifices, but you're not leading by example. Nigerians want to see the presidents lead by example. Nigerians want to see the lawmakers lead, the governors. And I think this is, as much as I know that based on data, even if all the political appointees and elected officers don't collect 1 naira, Nigeria will still be a poor country. But it's symbolic. It's leading by example. It is setting the right tone. And then you can galvanize the population to queue behind you, knowing fully well that we can now trust you, that that pain that we're going through today, we will reap the benefit tomorrow and for generations coming after us. Until we get to that point, I'll say the president has started well. He needs to build on that, sustain it, and also go beyond just the federal government, because when my life is miserable, because I can't do my small business, whether it's coming from local government or state government or federal, it's irrelevant. I just know I'm a Nigerian and I can't function. So he needs to use the power of his office to make sure that even the subnationals, government agencies, from the police to the ports to the tax authority, we should just stop frustrating ourselves. It's almost like the knee on the neck. You need to remove it so we can breathe. And then democracy will become more meaningful.
That's what Jacob Pele talked about, the knee on the neck thing. So, I mean, talking about the knee on the neck, let me come to you, because you're manufacturers and the knees have been on your neck for much longer. I think you're beginning to adapt to the fact that the knee is never going to leave your neck. But it does appear as if there's a lot in what the president has said, both in his inaugural address and thereafter, that should be music to your ears. Uniform interest rates, stabilized exchange rates, and so on. This is music to your ears, but as Mr. Yedele pointed out, do you believe this?
Well, okay. I think it's just customary that I join him to say Happy Democracy Day to Nigerians, but democracy will not mean anything except those people who have sacrificed time, resources, even life in the past. have something to show for it. So I think I join him in saying that the president so far has always said the right things. Now is the time for him to put action to the words. So, but to go directly to what you're saying, we've had this nail on our neck since independence. But in more recent times, we have seen a situation where government has only paid lip service to the plight of the manufacturing sector. And we have always said it, that there is no nation on earth that is considered wealthy or developed or prosperous that does not have a vibrant manufacturing sector. The sector has the greatest opportunity to create jobs, has the greatest opportunities to revive an economy and set the path to development. All over the world, governments directly and intentionally incentivize manufacturing. So for us, the president has spoken well against the backdrop that there's huge government trust deficit. We have been disappointed for a very long time. But you see, we have an adage around this part of the world that new broom sweeps clean. So far, he has said the right things. He has said that he will prefer that he supports domestic manufacturing as against importation. I mean, that is the best strategy any government can have, particularly now that AFCFTA has brought competition closer to us and much easier for us to deal with. He's also said that he's going to see a unified exchange rate. We have always advocated for that. And we know that if we do not have forex to import raw materials, parts, and machines that are not locally available, we are not going to be able to expand our production and be competitive. So he has said the right thing in that. He's also spoken about multiple taxes and levies. And the critical thing he has said is that he's going to allow fiscal policy measures to support manufacturing. But there are very critical ones that he needs to deal with from day one. And that's when we take him seriously. As a matter of fact, we've had better promises, I must tell you. But
was there promises?
Yes, but they remain promises until we see intentional efforts. And there are very low-hanging fruits that I think in the course of our conversation we should be able to have. There are so many things that are waiting for him to redress, things that I've done in recent past that he just needs to come and put a stop to. There's the single-use plastic green tax policy that he needs to remove. There's the excise escalation that does not make any sense and will lead to the death of a sector that is most contributive to our GDP in terms of manufacturing. All those ones are waiting for him to do on day one. And I think he's still saying the right thing. He needs to do the right thing.
Well, we have gone beyond day one now. I think we're already on day 14.
Yeah, day 14.
But I mean, your point is well taken. Let me bring in Mr. Bismarck Rewane. And he has an unusual viewpoint of this because Bismarck Rewane was on the presidential economic team under the last administration. And so I want to find out from you, Mr. Rewane, coming from that background and what you've heard so far from the tax authorities and, of course, the manufacturers, and then now on the basis of what you have also heard from the president himself, are we on the right trajectory economically going forward, provided, as both the previous speakers have said, these words are backed with action?
Good evening, viewers. I'm happy to be here today to celebrate June 12 and the democracy principles. Coming back to the real issue, the point is that I listened to the president's inaugural speech, and the goals are very clear. He wants to achieve 6% growth from the current 2%. He wants to harmonize and unify. The word is he wants to unify exchange rates, and he wants to bring inflation under control. But at the same time, he thinks he can bring down interest rates. Therein lies the contradiction. If you're going to have a strong currency, if you're going to fight inflation effectively, you cannot have that and at the same time have low interest rates. Because it's all about growth, and growth is a function of investment. Investment is a function of savings, and therefore, if you increase interest rates to mobilize savings, then you would see, one, people will save and investment flows will be available. Two, international investors will bring their money in because the rates are high and the exchange rate is stable, so they'll be able to get their money out. Thirdly, and most importantly, is the fact that the international diaspora, Nigerian diaspora flows, which currently is at about $23 billion, can actually go as high as $50 billion and can make up for the shortfall in the visible flows, which is the trade flows, the oil flows, because they are coming back to seek a yield on their investments. So let's get that clear. But the most important variable in this whole equation is confidence of the people, confidence of investors, confidence of consumers, and confidence of manufacturers. Now, I think the previous panel, somebody talked about the trust deficit. The trust deficit is potent, it's there. Nobody believes the government. And so my suggestion, number one, is that let's sequence our actions first before promises of what to do. Let's deliver to the people. For example, if we are saying that we are giving all university and polytechnic students and teacher training college students full scholarship from the proceeds to be reaped from the petroleum subsidy, automatically the people feel the effect, ab initio. Then you collect the money from and use that to actually cover the holes created. But there are promises and there's no delivery, and there's also inefficiency and corruption in the system. But all I can say at this point is that the fact that the subsidy was removed, even though in a very disorganized manner, it's an intent to make sure that the Nigerian government cannot live continuously beyond its means. Two, the fact that monetary policy is going to be reformed completely and overhauled in a manner that is acceptable to global standards means that the exchange rate begin to harmonize and move in the right direction. But what I do know is that next month we have a $500 million obligation maturity of the Eurobond, which we must pay. And the facts will come out as to what the true value and volume of our external reserves are, because we are making some assumptions that the data that we have is actually accurate. We must have accurate data about the true position of things. That's all I can say at this point.
Thank you, Mr.
A
Bismarck.
lot of food for thought there.
Indeed. I mean, that's a lot of money. Let's come over to our Abuja studios and to you, Yinka Okpeke. And this is also looking at your sector and the role that the pronouncement by the president plays. What would you say is should we be doing or looking at in terms of solving some of our economic woes?
Okay. I'd like to join my great speakers by wishing Nigerians Happy Democracy Day. And while I listened to the president's speech, which I would consider quite apt and coincides, I feel that his administration has an uphill task of making true of all those promises, because just like the other speakers have said, Nigerians have lost the confidence, in the leadership, and understandably so. And putting it in perspectives, I was looking at the numbers in terms of the importance of security, some of the big things. So I'd like to take it holistically first before I narrow it down a bit. And I look at security, I look at unemployment, as at now it's about 33%, out of which like 70% are the youth. And then I look at the issues of interest rates, it's about 22%, all-time high in 18 years or so. And then the GDP is 2.3%, which is even lower than the 3.1% as at 2022. And then we talk about the 2023 budget. It's about 21 trillion. 10 trillion of it is internally generated revenue. So 11 trillion of that is what? And then when you look at that, you look at how much of all that funds, it comes from servicing loans, then how much of all that funds is going into expenditure, paying salaries and things like that, about 8.3%, and that's about 40% of the entire budget. And then you look at how much goes into servicing all of these loans, which is about 6.3 trillion, and that's like 29%. So holistically, you're saying about close to 70% goes into recurring expenses and things like that, and then just less than about 30% goes into social infrastructure, talking about education, talking about health, talking about roads, and so many other things. So all of that, and then on top of that, we talk about the subsidy. So while I commend the president for decisively removing, the fuel subsidy, there's so much that still needs to be done. And now talking about bringing it home to our sector in the oil and gas, I look at it and I'm like, this is the right time for the government to start seeing how they can de-emphasize a lot of focus on oil. So Nigeria has been branded oil and gas, understandably so. But the truth of the matter is, the gas sector, for example, I see that as a transition field in terms of that is where a lot should be going into. And then in terms of agriculture, manufacturing, I look at, gas to cleaner energy to domestic use. I look at gas to industrialization, petrochemical industries, plastic, textiles. I look at gas to power, I look at gas to agriculture, to fertilizers and things like that. So there's a lot that needs to happen in that framework. I was actually reading one of the documents that was released by the government, by the president's team. He put together a team, an advisory. It's the oil and gas subcommittee of the what do you call that? Policy Advisory Council, exactly. And they made some very good recommendations in terms of saying how the federal government can reduce their involvement in the onshore, and shallow water JVs and all of that. And that made sense to me because when they do things like that, it reduces the amount of bureaucracy, inefficiency, allows the indigenous oil companies to play in that space, and that increases efficiency because immediately, when I was looking at the numbers, I think they said it was up to maybe about, the value was about maybe $19 billion. I'm not really sure about the figures, but that helps them to also increase their revenue, and even though they still keep a lot of their revenues in terms of the upstream sector, so that's one thing that they can look into, and other things I believe that as we're speaking, I'll delve more into things like that.
Thank you, Yinka. Professor Nana, I just wanted to get your thoughts, and this is from what you've heard from our guests here in Lagos, and also Yinka, who has, talked about a number of things, the problems, the challenges, and some of the solutions that she's proffered.
I will want you to take a look at this, of course, from the fact that, you're chief economist at the African Development Bank, and the African Development Bank is one of several multilateral organizations that is involved in Nigeria's economy. So, when people talk about building trust, it's one of those institutions that we need to build trust in, apart from the World Bank, the IMF, the Islamic Development Bank, and other such institutions that we're currently involved in. So, again, do you trust the trajectory that it seems as if we're following now?
Thank you for having me. By the way, let me just correct the narrative. I am the chief economist of the Development Bank of Nigeria, not the African Development Bank. But that being said, I will say this. In terms of trust, trust is a prerequisite for any transaction to be consummated. And now the president has spoken well and has followed through with some of the things he said during his inaugural address. Subsidy was removed from day one. While it wasn't removed in a coordinated manner, some might say, but at least he had the courage to act. And that has taken some great time, painstakingly, to achieve this. So fuel subsidy is gone, and let's just get used to it. And the truth of the matter is now we have to find a way to find palliatives to support folks at the bottom of the pyramid. Our behavior will have to change. Instead of driving cars, maybe CNG gas buses and so on. But that's by the way. Broadly looking at the macros, the inflationary pressure still is there. Food input price inflation from food is there, 24% and inching upwards. Insecurity challenges, endogenous, that's there. So what I will say here is this. Because we know that there are a lot of endogenous as well as exogenous problems affecting the real economy in Nigeria, the uphill battle is there, but we know truthfully that the president is actually courageous enough to follow through on some of its promises. So we'll see where the next step is in terms of unifying the exchange rate. That's not going to be an easy task. While I appreciate the DG of man, unification is important. It makes everybody more competitive. As far as the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, if we don't unify the exchange rate, the truth of the matter is we'll be at a comparative disadvantage with industries in other peer countries, and Nigeria will consequently be a dumping ground for those goods. And you can just point to other countries to see where the flow of goods is actually going into Nigeria. But if you take a look at now the exchange rate dynamics, as soon as he mentioned the unification of the exchange rate, we saw a fluctuation in terms of what the official rate, or the I&E window, if you will, as well as the parallel market. Right now it's at 765 and depreciating further. But I do believe it will stabilize once things kind of get more clearer in terms of perspectives. But ultimately, like the previous speaker, Mr. Verwani did say, he is questioning the veracity of the reserve balance. The reserve, we point fingers at the reserve a lot. For me, the reserve is just for import coverage. If we have enough for import coverage, it's much ado about nothing. But that's just one man saying this, of course. But the real truth is, if we take a look at what we can do in terms of raising and diversifying the revenue base of the economy, that's where we need to focus on. So the oil and gas sector is one of them. Agriculture is another. Manufacturing is another. We can go on and on and on, but ultimately is a diversification of the revenue base. And these policies that have to speak to the people will now tell us whether trust is going both ways. I'll pause there. Thank you.
Let me come back to you then, because again, it comes back to what people popularly call headwinds. Now, as you said, the headwinds have been there for a very long time. They've just been exacerbated by more recent events, not excluding things like the war in Ukraine, the COVID-19 pandemic, and so on, which we did not have direct control. No Nigerian government could have said anything or planned for any of those things. But now, with something like the fuel subsidy and the fairly disorganized manner in which it was removed, there are going to be some headwinds. We've already started seeing those headwinds. I mean, I was speaking to someone who said to me that, you know, in the morning of the presidential inauguration, he was on his way to the southwest, Ibadan, and he bought a melon at 800 naira on his way. And then when he was coming back the next morning, the same melon was 2,000 naira. And so he was saying, look, you know, what was responsible for the change? And he said, did you listen to the president? You know, so there are headwinds in terms of what people can afford. Already, I think somebody mentioned the idea that we need to change our attitude. Many bicycles have returned to the streets and so on. So again, the idea is that how many businesses will survive in the short term before all these policies that we've talked about so far come to fruition and then begin to benefit them?
Yes, I think that there's a popular saying that there's no gain without pain. It's quite unfortunate, and I believe that it's an issue you need to consider very seriously. There are implications for government, for the individual. There is also an implication for businesses. You have this situation, somebody has a deep cut, and the blood is oozing out. And you say until you have the surgeon, until you have the bandage, until you have an ambulance and so on, you are not going to stop the bleeding. You are best served to just stop the bleeding. Subsidy was bleeding Nigeria. We needed to stop it. And I think that the president took that decision because he knew that if he would allow time, what happened to the previous leaders that they couldn't remove it will happen to him. So he did it from day one, and we are dealing with the challenges. It's going to be very difficult for businesses. But you see, every situation that comes, you must look at it in a dynamic and progressive manner. We are going to have costs going up, and they have gone off. But we need to look at what will have happened if we didn't remove it. We have a deficit budget of 12 trillion. 7 trillion is subsidy. That does not help anybody. We are fueling, we are feeding foreign production. You see, fuel that we are buying that is being subsidized is not produced locally. If it was produced locally, I would have been a very happy man, because what you are doing, you are incentivizing, you are subsidizing local production. But so, if you want to benefit from the oil industry in Nigeria, it's better for you to go and establish a refinery outside of Nigeria, because we now have an appetite for it. Refineries are closing in Benin Republic because we have just removed subsidy. So I think what government has done is to stop the bleeding. Then it now comes to individual, like I said, to businesses, and to even government. Government should not tell us to tighten our belts without tightening its belt. We need to ensure that we patronize local products, for instance, so that we can expand manufacturing, so that we can expand productivity. We need to be able to plow back the money, and people should see results immediately. We have issues of lack of power supply. It's not only vehicles that you use petrol for. People buy petrol to put in their generators. If you improve power supply, they won't have to put it in their generators. You cannot tell us that we should mind the way we fuel our cars and run around, and then Mr. President or Mr. Governor or even the local government chairman is traveling, and there are 40, 50, 30, 20 vehicles on his trail. He should cut it. I mean, so that we all know that we are facing a dire situation, and then we'll be able to plow back the money into the process. Government needs to demonstrate leadership. Government needs to also communicate with the people. Now, nobody is going to come and invest in our economy if you know that the price is controlled. Why should I go and establish a modular refinery, for instance, when I know that I'm not going to sell because government has reduced the price for the ordinary people to buy? How are we going to ensure that we do not have a system that promotes corruption? During Okonjo-Iweala last time, she did mention that there was a time they did an audit on 6.4 trillion worth of subsidy. They discovered a fraud of 2.5 trillion. When she wanted to stop it, her mother was kidnapped. So it shows that there is serious fraud in all of this, and we just needed to solve it. So the pains that we are having, I think there are legitimate claims that government should not cause pain for the people. And government should realize it. They shouldn't take the patience of Nigerians for granted. The fact that we've been able to avert a national strike should be a warning to Mr. President that he needs to do something and do it quickly. And he needs to demonstrate leadership by showing it in himself. He shouldn't have a retinue of wasters.
Yeah, indeed. At that point, let me bring in Engineer Janet Adeyemi, who is the president of Women in Mining in Nigeria, because that's another sector where we're having a lot of potential and wastage. Engineer Adeyemi, welcome to the program. I don't know what you make of economic policy at this point and how that has affected the idea about diversification, because what everybody has said so far has to do with that. And mining would have been one of the areas that we could have exploited. But as usual with many other sectors, what is going on there is opaque, is not transparent, and therefore we're not getting full value. What do you make of this?
Thank you so much. Let me join others to say Happy Democracy Day to Nigerians. I'm happy you raised the issue because you can see that even in the course of discussion, you can see how opaque the mining sector is. Because when you are talking about diversification, I would have expected the earlier speakers to quickly jump to mining. Mining, as we know, today we are all enjoying fossil fuel, but Nigeria is not in isolation. We live in a global space, and that global space is shifting gradually from fossil fuel to clean energy. And if you must go through that energy transition, whether you want to go rapidly, whether you want to go slowly, or whether we want to be just about it, you must embrace what you call energy minerals, critical minerals, strategic minerals. But coming in terms of looking at the economic potential of the mining sector, you and I know that mining was literally killed in Nigeria, the characteristic manner of Nigerians, because when we found oil, the fossil fuel, we jettisoned what we used in building the initial economy of Nigeria. Tin mining started as far back as 1902. Gold gold and coal all before that time. You understand? Yeah, we are what was used in building Nigerian economy. And as of 1916, more than 900,000 tons of coal was exported out of this country, with over 8,000 people working in the mine site. Well, what become of all those things? So that system completely shut down, and we left the space for illegality. So when you talk about contribution, what the mining sector has been able to contribute since the Obasanjo era, you understand, when, thank God for the weaponization of the fossil fuel, that is oil and gas, which forced us to start looking at alternatives. And if we must develop the economic potentials of this country, we must look at mining, we must look at agriculture, we must look at entertainment, we must look at ICT, we must look at sports. Those are front burner issues now to be supported, because it's only a healthy man that can generate income, supported by the health sector, supported by some other education sector, because you must equally have the skill. So these things are very important. And I believe that the president haven't looked at it all. He has served in various capacities as a senator, as a governor, and now he's coming in as a president. He saw the gap. He saw the problems. How can a nation survive? I represent CSPF in the World Bank, and in the last spring meeting we had in DC in April, it was clear that all African countries are in trouble. Nigeria alone with 77 trillion naira. The whole of African countries is owing about $1.8 trillion. And no country is willing to give any money for that. World Bank is not willing to even support any project. So how do you survive? So going back, they have no choice other than to remove the subsidy. The subsidy, you understand, is a drain pipe. And you have found out that a few, less than 0.005% Nigerians exploited the rest of Nigerians, you understand, draining the economy, you understand, with subsidy. So removing subsidy, I think, is a good thing. But how do we move further? Moving further is where the president now must be very innovative. You must now find a way of meeting the yearnings of those people who never benefited from the subsidy, because the subsidy was a thing, or it's for the very rich. And how do you address that? You address that through some other policies, friendly policies, like you tax the rich so much. You look at their housing program, you tax it. Everywhere loot was taken to, that is, go to Abuja, you find quite a number of locked up estates. People not building, just use it to tie down their capital, since they know they cannot even at times take the money out of the country because of the strict economic restrictions on the financial restrictions on inflows and outflows. So governments should look at property tax and look at houses that are not occupied, look at the category of houses, come up with very innovative strategies like that to do that. And just like an earlier speaker said, the size of governance must be trimmed. All this SA to PA to PA to SA must vanish in the system. Then if we must adopt a social security system, let's come up with a social security system to make it work. So looking at all these things, we now have to focus on areas that need to be focused on, such as mining. Mining, so many laws, so many policies have been in place, but because of the dominance of the ASM people who are not educated, it becomes obviously extremely difficult to realize any meaningful results. And then again, you look at the mining sector. The mining sector in totality has contributed about 3.3 billion naira to Nigerian economy. What is 3.3 billion naira? When you just oppose it with the kind of equipment needed and all that, so that tells you that the sector is still not where it ought to be. So many incentives are being given, but this is the time to rejig. This is the time to strengthen and come up with serious regulatory frameworks that are robust, that we take into cognizance all the various policies, such as the African Mining Vision, the Agenda 2063 of the AU, the UN document. Look at and make our law extremely robust to attract investors to be able to come in. Because what you have most times are not real investors. Very few investors are in the mining space. We have about 5 minutes.
We have about 5 minutes to end this segment, so I'm going to divide the time very quickly. I'm going to give you, Mr. Idele, 90 seconds now, just to talk quickly about the issue of taxes, which Mr. Kadri considers very important. What to do?
Yeah, thank you very much. Taxes, taxes, taxes. So the president mentioned these and we all got excited. But we need to now translate that into concrete action plan. Number one, the past administration introduced two important changes to the tax system at the last minute. One is the fiscal policy measure that was introduced end of April, increasing the excise duties on tobacco, on non-alcoholic beverages, on alcoholic beverages, single-use plastic, almost without any consultation. This is in addition to increases that had been announced previously as of 2022 to 2024. Some of those increases up to 100%. And this is a sector when, because we introduced the Naira redesign policy that was badly designed and poorly implemented, many of them had decline in their sales in double digits, and some of them closing down their plants. Now, in addition to that, 28th of May, the previous president signed the Finance Act 2023 into law to take effect immediately. We didn't even know he had signed until a few weeks later. We're already in default, increasing tertiary education tax, introducing new taxes to crypto. This is not ideal. The current president has promised, I will review the complaints of investors and manufacturers, deal with unfriendly investment and policies, unfriendly investment policies. So he now needs to translate that very quickly. First, do an executive order. Suspend all those last-minute laws and changes. You don't do laws in a hurry, right? Engage and use data. Evidence to make decisions is extremely important. And the best way to raise tax revenue is not, if someone is in intensive care, you can't ask them to give a little bit more blood, right? The best way to grow tax revenue is to grow the economy. When you grow the economy, a natural law will follow. Your revenues will go up. So this way of doing things in a way that is disjointed, we have to stop that, engage people, speak to them, and then let's make progress. If you just start by harmonizing the taxes we have, there are too many of them. We need just a single digit in terms of number of taxes. We can make 40 trillion naira from just 4 taxes if we manage it well. Then the revenue agencies are too many. Let there be just one revenue agency collecting revenue and taxes for government, and then use data for intelligence. So if I have houses in Abuja, Lagos, Abuja, even Dubai, right? Exchange of information, and Nigeria has signed with over 100 countries. Use the existing data and intelligence to collect the existing taxes. Stop adding more to those taxes. It's not working.
I want to go to Mr. Bismarck Rewane, and this is, with all that we've talked about, how indeed does, all of these translate and affect, because they do affect the common man, at the end of the day. Will forming the cabinets, or who, holds one ministry or the other, will that affect the economy? Talking about the decision this new administration has to make, and then what do you see them doing? What should they do that would ease things for that Nigerian man, the ordinary man on the street?
Yes, thank you, Millicent. The truth is that at the end of the day, what is most important to an economist is the welfare of the people. You can have all the indicators looking positive, but if people are unhappy, then you will have happy statistics and unhappy people. 1. 2, I've heard all the analysts say here that subsidy has been removed. No, the truth is that subsidy has been reduced. If the subsidy is removed, then the price of PMS, as you see today, will be much higher than what it is. Now, having said that, 3 is that policy reform is not the same thing as institutional reform. What you're seeing today, because of all of these things on the internet, is that the institutions that actually implement policies in Nigeria are rotten, and that you need to reform those institutions all the way from administration of justice to taxes to monetary policy. All of those institutions need to be reformed so that there'll be no impunity. 4 is that you cannot do partial equilibrium analysis. In other words, you cannot fix the interest rates and leave the exchange rate alone. You cannot fix petroleum subsidy and leave debt alone. So it has to be a comprehensive package where everything is looked at the same time. And then you begin to go towards general equilibrium. 4 is that the people are the owners of the country. The leaders are the servants of the country. So we need to change that mindset so everybody knows that you have to hold the feet of policymakers and politicians to the fire. I think we've seen a lot of that in the last few days. Anybody who is in position of authority now knows that it serves the people. Now, the truth is that also, I heard something about minimum wage review. Price inflation, wage inflation, inflation expectations all come together. There's no way you can do this. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. So we have to be, first and foremost, honest with the people. We have to put the facts on the table. What exactly, what is our population? What are our net external reserves free of encumbrance? What is the true price of oil? What's the oil revenue? When we now have the facts, we now know how to utilize it and how to optimize the resources that Nigeria has. Without optimization of resources, we will have suboptimal outcomes. And that is where we are going. But to answer your question as to what is going to happen to the ordinary man, there's been almost a 200% increase in the price of EMS. But it's not a one-on-one relationship. We've seen a 50% increase in the local transportation costs. We believe, from my regression, we've seen that inflation now at 22.7 for the month of June, if it comes out this week. We think that inflation will go as high as 25% in June and about 28% in July. If you have that kind of inflation and you are also wishing to have lower interest rates, then you need a review of your, you need to go back to 001 economics. So I think that, one, we have to accept that effective interest rates in the country will increase to actually make the people save more. We think that the price of loans, not unsubsidized loans, are going to go higher. We believe that there'll be impairments and some loans will go bad. But at the same time, we would see a major flow of investments when the exchange rate stabilizes at a level that is acceptable. Investments will increase, there'll be an investment multiplier, and that the level of unemployment and all of these other variables, everything will get better. But like I said, short-term pain, medium-term gains, but credibility of those in office who must stop the hemorrhaging, and more than anything else, reforming the institutions. It's not about who is in the job, it depends on what job and where the people in those jobs know what they cannot do. There's too much abuse and leakages in the system. That has to stop immediately. Thank you.
All right, then, with that, much as I would have liked our other guests to weigh in a bit more on this, we have to end this segment because we've still got one more segment, and it's a very important segment.
Yes, but we have questions also from our audience on the economy.
Ini, this one will have to be quite sharp and straight to the point.
All right. Okay, all right. So I have, I think a lot of the questions have actually been answered, but I'll just call Mr. Macroeconomic to share his own question.
Hi, good evening. My name is Macroeconomic. I'm the Managing Director for Cummins West Africa Limited. Thanks, Mr. Shego and Taiwo, for speaking passionately. My comment will be really around Forex, right? Harmonizing the exchange rate, sounds like a really great idea. However, we spoke about making it available. I think that's a great idea. I love the initiative. Nigeria is a consuming nation, not a manufacturing nation. And if we don't make those Forex available, the manufacturing industry will go away, right? And to me, that's a big threat, right? So I think the government needs to help the manufacturing industry have access to those Forex. There's no other way to make Nigeria a manufacturing hub for the rest of Africa and the rest of the world. So my question goes to Taiwo. What's your advice to the government in order to make sure that Forex is available for the manufacturing industries? Because we're suffering. we're really, really going through a lot of hell trying to access those forex. We can't get materials, we cannot manufacture. At the end of the day, it's going to impact the employees, it's going to impact the environment in which we operate. Thank you.
All right, just one more quick one. We have to take Ahmad because he came all the way from Abuja to be part of this. So we need to appreciate him and for traveling that far and joining the audience here and share your question.
With reduced subsidized fuel.
Thank you very much. I think my question is quite concise. We know how businesses have been suffering, especially multinationals, and I like the fact that my boss here, Mr. Taiwo, have already spoken about multiple taxation. Now, a lot of businesses have been finding it very difficult. It has been a serious bottleneck. Some haven't gone as far as winding up because of issues of multiple taxation. So my question is, what are the strategies the government can put in place to reduce the taxes and harmonize the taxes? Very, very important, because I think that is one news that all businesses have been excited about, and they are waiting for the next action point on that. Thank you to Mr. Taiwo.
All right, over to you.
Thank you very much. So the first question, thank you very much. I do think that they are low-hanging fruits. Maybe we should even say they are fruits on the floor. Just pick them up. Number one is we've created, I'm addressing the FX question, we've created unnecessary demand against the Naira, such that within Nigeria, there are legal requirements as well as government MDAs demanding payments in foreign currency. So it's in the tax laws all over the place. Even some government MDAs and agencies, from Port Authority to the master, they ask you to pay dollars in Nigeria. So you go and queue in the forex market where there's no forex, create unnecessary demand. When you find it, you're lucky. If you can't find it, buy at parallel markets, give to government, they recognize it at 460. It's completely insane. Then the second thing is, with the removal of first subsidy, I do disagree with my brother, Mr. Bismarck. I think it's completely removed.
Reduced.
Yes. So he's saying reduced because there's still FS subsidy. But that's easier to control than the cost under recovery. Now, with the removal of subsidy, what's going to happen is I expect there should be a reduction in consumption by close to 50%. That happened about 13 years ago when we removed the subsidy on diesel. And it wasn't that they transfer consumption to petrol. It just disappeared. Yes. That saves you around $8 billion that you no longer have to spend on fictitious consumption, some of it going to other countries. You can prioritize manufacturing, right? Prioritizing them will have a ripple effect because you create more employment. And then we also have this provision. Mr. President also promised that he wants to create about 1 million digital economy jobs. I'll tell you today, we have provisions in our laws that make it impossible, unless you don't have the knowledge, for a foreign company to employ a Nigerian who is in Nigeria to work for them. Because our law says, well, you made a mistake, just employ someone in Nigeria. You've created a permanent establishment. You must come to Nigeria, file returns, pay taxes. Nobody is doing that anymore. Those are the things we inherited over 60 years ago. Let me
put you on pause, because this same question you raised, I want the chief economist of the Development Bank of Nigeria to weigh in on this. And because we're completely out of time now, Professor Nana, I want you to do this in 60 short seconds. Please just weigh in on this issue of Forex, because as we have heard, it's critical.
Okay, thank you. Well, in terms of Forex, the challenge, as every speaker has said, is real to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria and a plethora of other Nigerians trying to access Forex. But the truth of the matter is this: it's the demand and supply game. So if we cannot generate foreign direct investments coming in, we can generate FX indeed, then clearly there's always going to be that excess liquidity in Naira and illiquidity in dollar, putting extra pressure on the Naira for the devaluing or depreciating, as they will say, or adjustments. But the truth of the matter is this: I personally feel that problems can be solved by doing a couple of things. Strong men, weak institutions has been the name of the game for Nigeria for a very long time. Perhaps we can now put the right people in the right places to introduce reforms, which Mr. Rwani has already said. And we need the right people to do this reformation of these institutions, because ultimately it's through these institutions impact can be made. And if households and MSMEs don't feel it, then guess what? The country as far as I'm concerned, is in dire problems, in perpetuity. So we have to remember this. Strong men, weak institutions. We have to reform our institutions for strength, for growth, for the future, and use technology to drive this change. We can use technology to track people, to generate revenues, to tax people, and so on. Let's do it.
Thank you.
And
pause there.
that's where we're completely out of time now.
Honestly.
Completely out of time.
And
So
we need to go to another sector where all of this is hinged on, and that's
because
security.
none of what we've talked about so far is possible. But before we do that, let's thank Professor Joseph Nana, who just spoke, Yinka Peke in our Abuja studios, Engineer Janet Adeyemi, who joined us virtually, same with Bismarck Rwane, and then, of course, here in the Lagos studios, Segun Ajayi Kadri and Taiwo Oyedele. Thank you all very much for your contributions.